In schools, they teach there's as many genders as there are people, and that you can be any gender you want to be. And, if you take a bell curve of men and women, boys, girls, we overlap, we have similarities, but
Hmm.
we're also in generally different from each other. And while I was being taught that gender didn't exist, I was also being taught that everything boys did because it was competitive was bad. And
Yeah.
everything that girls did because it was cooperative was good, even though gender didn't exist.
Right.
Nowadays, you've got a lot of cooperative men and a lot of, competitive girls. And we've just done a flip flop. And I
Yeah.
don't think it made anybody any happier. As you said, I've been around for a while. My background is I have a PhD in marriage and family therapy. I no longer refer to myself as a marriage therapist because I let my license go several years ago when I left the state I was licensed in to move to Mexico. Not
Hmm.
because I was on the run for any
Yeah.
particular reason, other than I just like it here. So I live in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico.
Oh, cool.
My book, No More Mr. Nice Guy, came out early 2000s, has been out almost 25 years now. And for a book that a lot of publishers said, oh, it's a good book, but our marketing department says men won't buy a self help book.
Yeah.
And I said, well, you're going to have to publish them for men to buy them.
Yeah.
Now, that was kind of pre Amazon and Kindle Reader and Audible and kind of, interviews and podcasts where, people put links to books on Amazon and people
Yeah.
just go buy them. But 25 years into it, my royalty checks keep getting bigger. So the book has not only uh, survived, it's thrived, and partly because of the diagram that you already pulled up,
Yeah.
that I think we've got more and more nice guys every generation. There was a
Yep.
bunch of them in my generation. I'm tail end, baby boomer generation. What was it, X that came after me? Then the millennials, my son's generation, now the Z. We just got more and more nice guys out there, or as the Z's would call them, simps,
Yep.
and or as Red Pill would call them, Blue Pill, or
Hmm.
Captain Save-A-Hose.
Yeah.
Um, so I agree with you that this life paradigm, that's really what it is. It's a roadmap that men have tend to internalize at a young age due to a number of factors, maybe partly disconnection from father, a lack of masculine initiation, um, trying to please our mothers and
Yeah.
female caregivers we had in preschool and elementary school, trying to please the women in junior high that complained that men only wanted one thing. And we were happy to listen to them complain about those men that only wanted one thing because we
Yeah.
thought they would like us and maybe let us have that one thing with them without letting them know we wanted that.
Right.
Now we've got the whole social media that I think has had a big impact on feminizing men. I'd like to talk with you more about your thoughts on that,
For sure.
and the whole toxic masculinity meme that has been so popular. I'm thinking maybe it's beginning to fade. Um,
A
but
little bit.
I love how where kind of one of your memes is women go online, TikTok, whatever, and everything is boys bad, girls
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
And I heard
And
that
bad.
in graduate school in the 1980s when I was in child development, and my feminist teachers were teaching that gender does not exist. It's just a social construct imposed on children by society. Children are born tabula rasas, blank slates,
Hmm.
and then they are shaped. Well, there was absolutely no uh, scientific evidence to back up that
Of
stand.
course.
Now,
Of
now, now
course.
they're still running with it to this day.
Yeah.
In schools they teach there's as many genders as there are people, and that you can be any gender you want to be. And if you take a bell curve of men and women, boys, girls, we overlap, we have similarities, but
Hmm.
we're also in generally different from each other. And so yeah, this whole thing, and while I was being taught that gender didn't exist, I was also being taught that everything boys did because it was competitive was bad, and
Yeah.
everything that girls did because it was cooperative was good, even though gender didn't exist.
Right.
Nowadays, you've got a lot of cooperative men and a lot of competitive girls, and we've just done a flip flop, and I
Yeah.
don't think it made anybody any happier.
No. No, I think everyone's losing their minds and they don't have the language for it, and they don't have the the cognitive structure, which we'll get into later. I wish I had my chart printed out. I'll get my printer working one day, but for now I just
You
have
keep
this.
promising that, man. I've seen enough of your videos that you keep promising. Why
My
don't you
yeah.
why don't you tell us, describe that diagram that you have in front, because I love it.
So you mean this little one or this thing?
The one with the guy on the box on his back, because you really
Yeah,
do
sure.
describe how I've seen a lot of situations. Now, I would
Hmm.
actually add maybe one more person to it.
Hmm.
I'm not sure where it fits on the continuum, but I was talking about kind of the wussy doormat on one hand, the asshole jerk on the other hand,
Hmm.
and we think those are actually two different entities. I
Right.
think I think they're just an extension of the same dynamic of men being in their sympathetic nervous system of fight,
Yeah.
flight, freeze.
Yes.
The passive men are in the flight and freeze mode. The bad men, the angry men, are just in the fight mode. And both are just trying to manage the people in the situations outside them to deal with their stress and their anxiety.
Yeah.
So what I see happening is like a lot of these, men with the box on them, that's the nice guys that I talk to. Okay. I'm responsible. I'm taking care of everybody's needs. I have no boundaries. I give to get.
Yeah.
Um, and then a lot of them go, well, I just don't want to do that. So I just won't grow up. I'll
Exactly.
stay in the nursery. I'll be Peter Pan. So my question is, how does the guy in the middle get that box off his back, and or how do we go from Peter Pan on your diagram over to the useful differentiated man there
Yes.
on the right? What?
Yes, exactly. And I'm so glad that of course you did, but I'm so glad that you got all of that and understood all of that. The biggest problem that I have when I use this particular picture and ones like it is that a lot of guys, even the ones in my audience, will resist. They'll resist becoming this guy because this is basically, the child, this is the entry level adult, and this is the fully formed adult who is competent and confident and knows what he's doing. It's very, very difficult for men today, young men particularly, to get through this stage, to go from being a child to become competent, because the steps in the way are there are a lot of doors that are closed to them that didn't necessarily used to be closed. It's harder to afford things. The women are, like, we are all in agreement that the women's standards are getting pretty nutty, and they're the first time that I used this guy was, let me see if I can find it. I did a lot of videos on money one week. Everybody just kept asking me about money, and there we are. I drew how men pay into the system, which goes into the corporate, and both of these things benefit women. Well, men pay more in taxes, women get more in benefits. And then they have this standard of life that they no longer need a man, and they go, oh, well, men are useless, and the men are getting left out. That's why I draw him burdened with that box on his back. A
And can
lot
I
of
can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
If you can handle interruptions, we're going to bounce around a bunch, I think.
Yes, this is normal for my channel. Just
Okay,
chaos.
let's, yeah, let's just run with it, man. Going back to that other diagram, because I was watching a video you did the other day,
Yeah.
and with the women, and the men pay into the system, and the women take out of the system.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I've heard for quite some time is that basically, we've said, okay, the patriarchy is bad, the men are bad, but the
Hmm.
patriarchy is really about providing and protecting.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we're going to cut men out. We don't need it, because the kind of the meme has been, government has become the husband.
Yeah.
Government will take care of women who have children that they can't raise, and can't support themselves. So government will take care of them. That's one
Yeah.
reason I've always thought that men get put through the ringer in divorce and custody settlements, is because the government would rather the guy who knocked up the woman or said, I want to live with you, take care of her after she doesn't want to live with him anymore, than the
Right.
government having to
Right.
take care of him. But I had a thought while I was watching you talk about this on a video the other day,
Hmm.
that I'm even wondering if things are shifting where the women are not so much looking for government to be the patriarch, to be the provider and protector, but they're looking for uh, business corporations. They
Yeah.
go to work for Meta, they go to work for Amazon, they go to
Yeah.
work for, and now they get paid ridiculously high salaries
Hmm.
for doing stuff that's probably not even tech related a lot of times.
Yeah. Sometimes it's not even work related.
And then they even pay them to freeze their eggs so they can keep
Hmm.
them working through, what would typically be their childbearing, the time of their life that their bodies were built to have kids.
Yep.
And then, you know, they think, well, because I'm being taken care of, and then they hit 40 and go, well, my clock's ticking. I need to find the man now
Hmm.
who makes at least as much as I do or more,
Yep.
already has his own house
Yep.
and wants to come make babies with me.
Yep.
And they're going, "Where are those guys?
The
I
guy
can't
who's
find
got
them."
everything. Yeah.
But they were so used to that somebody will always be there to take care of them.
Yes. Yeah, that's the I'm actually beginning to wonder if that's like a built-in evolutionary expectation that women have to look up to men, like who's going to take care of me. I don't even know if it's necessarily that our culture is that way. I think that it's very possible that, artificially moving the money towards women has put them in a position where they're just all looking for, you know, the very few men left who can give them the lifestyle that they want, which is why, marriages are not happening and everyone's angry on TikTok.
And I love that Scott Galloway calls those men up there at the top, Porsche polygamists.
Yeah,
The women go say, I want the guy that makes more than me and's got status. And, and I want to ask you some questions about status, looks, and money
for sure.
sometime on this call.
For sure.
And,
Yeah.
they go looking for, I want that guy, but that guy can pick from lots of women who probably isn't them.
You asked me how men get here. Were we still on that path?
Yeah, I'm asking, yeah, I love what you say that there is this rite of passage from childhood
Yeah.
into mature functioning adult. I've got my
Yeah.
own thoughts and opinions about it,
Hmm.
that involves masculine initiation to
Hmm.
where we come to see ourselves as having value that attracts the feminine to us
Yeah.
rather than seeing the women as having value that we got to go chase them.
Yes. This is I'm making a video on this currently about being the table. Are you familiar with that meme? Do you know that one?
Being the table, no, you're going to have to
So
share that one with me.
the whole money thing, um, men are starting to say it's too difficult to date women. Their standards are too high. They say, "What do you bring to the table?" You've probably heard that phrase. And then the women are saying, "I am the table," meaning, I don't have to know even what's good about me. I don't have to bring anything to the table. All I have to do is exist. I have a drawing for that too. This is her being the table. And her not contributing anything while the guy is like, "What do you want? What do you want? What do you want?" A lot of guys have had that experience.
It's not enough for say I've got some cool tattoos and piercings.
Right, exactly. That which is pretty much what it's like out there for a lot of us. So it's uh it's leading to a lot of pairing difficulty, and it's also, I think, the fact that the money and the power and the ability to make choices has been redistributed is making a lot of men not even want to get up and try, and they're not becoming anything. And that's their version of being the table. There are a lot of guys will say, I just want someone to like me for me. And it's like, well, no one's going to like this. You might be having fun, but girls are looking for someone who can do things, who can make them feel safe and protected and like they have a future together. And even though there's nothing I can do about making this step easier, like it was so hard for me, I didn't make it until last year. And that was a fluke. I got popular on a TikTok video. So I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm saying you have to find some way to get from here to here, even if it's not by going through the system. There were a lot of things that I did in between here, and I like to think of myself as here. Really, I'm a little bit of all three, but I moved more into this type of character by getting better at things on my own, even if they didn't pay, even if it wasn't at a job, by learning about women, by getting experience with them. It's mastery. You don't have to get a job and have a car and a house to go through this step of growing up. You just have to master things. And that's
I agree with that 100%. I'd put that in big capital letters that is what that mature man is. That's both attractive to the world and everything in it and women is
Mhm.
mastery.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm hoping that this generation can figure out a way to do that, because the traditional path certainly is not working as well for nearly as many people.
Well, and my thought about that guy there in the middle with thing on his back is that, and I've been asked this question a lot. Why are there so many nice guys, and why are they seeking the approval of women? I've
Hmm.
often said that kind of the golden rule of men nowadays is don't piss off the woman, whether
Yeah.
it's your mother, any woman on social media, a woman at work.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And so, and I've been asked, well, why is that? My thought is kind of going back to the evolutionary part that you're talking about.
Hmm.
Our for 1.5 million years, the men were the providers and the protectors. Women have always been
Yeah.
vulnerable, always
Yeah.
been at risk. They've not been as strong or as fast. They've carried babies inside their bodies. They've carried babies in their arms. They've depended on men in a harsh environment to
Yeah.
look out for their well-being, and that's gone on for long enough time in human history that it is wired into who we are as men and women. As much
Yeah.
as the feminists might want to deny that, but
Yeah.
it is
The
there
tabula
now.
rasa.
And now, what I see is that really, probably since World War II, but really beginning before that, boys
Hmm.
have been disconnected from masterful men. Dads, left the home either through divorce or they're working a lot or they're drinking or not available. And nowadays, boys stay in the nursery, I call it, over there, Peter Pan. I don't want to
Yeah.
grow up.
Yeah.
Having everything pushed to them. They can get their information pushed to them. They get their sex pushed to them. They get their meals pushed to them on Uber Eats. They get
Hmm.
everything is pushed. You don't have to do anything about,
Yeah.
really all you have to get masterful about is World of Warcraft. That's about it.
Right.
And that may pay. I'm not sure.
Not usually. That's
Not
something I
usually.
argue with my fans about sometimes.
I'm almost wondering if it's a good thing to say you kind of got to that right side because you had a TikTok video that went viral. I'm thinking every young guy's going, I'm going to be an influencer. I'm going to go viral. I'm
Well,
going to build a great click funnel.
yeah,
And
I hope not, because that's a thing I try to make clear, is that I would never have been able to take advantage of that opportunity if wasn't doing this all by myself. Like, I wasn't doing it in the job market and through college and everything. I was off kind of driving Uber and learning stuff on the side. But enough of me was at this point that when I got the opportunity, I already knew how to speak. I knew how to draw. I knew the subject material. I knew about this whole
yeah,
thing, the whole
you'd
consciousness
prepared.
system, and I was ready. And if you're not ready, then you're not going to be able to
And here's
handle
what
your opportunities.
I agree. And here's what I believe used to get men ready. It was masculine initiation.
Yes.
In tribal times, the masterful men would take the boys at adolescence, take them away from their mothers. I mean, it makes sense that a boy grows up seeking the approval of women. I mean, our first caregiver who we were dependent on for our survival was a woman. And from there on out is usually women taking care of us. So it makes sense that we would seek the approval of women.
Yeah.
But at some point, there has to be a transition. And that used to be back in tribal times, masculine initiation, where the men took the boys out and like the movie 300, when the boys in the cave with the spear with the wild animal outside, or
Yeah.
went on a vision quest, or did a sun dance, or jumped out of a tree with a vine tied around his leg, or got tied to an ant hill. And the men helped him through that death experience to overcome that fear of annihilment. and
Exactly.
and then they took him out. They bathed him, they initiated him, they had ceremony, they had dance. Now they said, you're part of the masculine tribe. And that's where I
Yeah.
say now the boys no longer had to go seeking the approval of women. They had what the women wanted. They had the resources, they had the furs, the food, and the fucks.
Yeah.
And the women were drawn to that in men. Now, because and then for about 10,000 years, boys got initiated by their fathers and their grandfathers and their uncles and their cousins in an agrarian society on the farm, working around the animals, working with their dads, learning what it meant to be a man. And now, like I said, since about World War II, boys just don't get any of that positive masculine influences that helps them move out of that stage of thinking, I have to have a woman's approval in order for me to approve of myself, in order for me to be a person of status. I have to have the approval of women.
Yeah.
And so
Exactly.
they go seeking the approval of women. And I don't know, I guess I've talked to enough women that women said, I'm not particularly attracted to men who are seeking my approval.
Yeah. they don't like that. They call that simping.
I,
That's the new thing, is that trying to please women doesn't please them. I have a whole thing about that too. Before we go off of it, I
I'll quit
want to.
interrupting you and finish some of your
No, no,
drawings.
no, no. That was great. It was just, there was something that you said in there about the initiation. I didn't actually learn about that until just last year. Somebody gave me this book, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. I can't
Right.
remember who wrote it, but it's on
Couple,
my
couple, couple Jungian guys.
yeah, it's on my my book list if anyone wants to find it.
Somebody will
And
probably put it in the chat.
oh, for sure, yeah. And the book talks about the child and the adult version of various things. And one thing that surprised me was that the hero is the child version. The hero is the childish version, because running off into danger isn't really what a mature man does. It's like, that's a young man thing to do to prove yourself. The idea of there being a structure of masculine initiation in society, that these men are supposed to know what you need to do to go through here to get here, and we don't have that anymore.
Right.
That's like, that spells trouble. I'm trying to do as much of it as I can, and I'm sure you are too. But
Well, it spells
I don't.
trouble both for that man who's either stuck in Peter Pan or stuck bearing the unnecessary load, seeking validation and approval,
Yeah,
with no boundaries and no ability to assert himself. But it also affects women, where the fact that people aren't getting married at all hardly, and we're at a much higher age statistically. You know, people aren't even hooking up. That
yeah,
so many people report not having had sex in the last year, not being in a relationship.
yeah,
And so this isn't just hurting men, this whole loss of masculine initiation. The women don't have very many good choices.
yeah, yeah. And the men don't know how to become good choices.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah,
And I don't think we can blame the men for that. I think that's on, I'm gonna say that's on us older guys, on my generation, that if we are not helping the younger men get from Peter Pan, because their mothers aren't going to help them get from Peter Pan into
no,
a masterful
they
man.
don't know how.
They don't know how, and maybe maybe some don't want their sons to grow up.
Yeah, there's
Um,
some of that too.
then they'll turn into the bad men that leave them, kind of like
Yeah,
all the
exactly.
other men have done.
Yeah,
So, but I think it's on us men to help the men, with the box on their back, to both begin shedding the things that aren't theirs to carry,
yeah,
and to begin finding the way to live a masterful life, because that's the only way we're ever going to feel good about ourselves.
right. Yeah. Um, Definitely figuring out what you don't have to carry is really important. I've got to zero in on that in some content too. There's a lot of things that men are being told they have the responsibility for that they really don't, and all it does is burden you, and it doesn't give you anything directly, and it doesn't give anything to your world that is going to make them want to give back to you either. It's just giving it up for nothing. You mentioned your generation. I did want to talk to you about. This is a very multi-generational event that we have. You're I
I
think
agree.
one generation behind me, maybe one and a half. I'm not sure. I won't ask. But and I'm
I'll
a
tell I'll
I'm a
tell you how old I am if you'll tell me how old you are.
Sure, we can do that.
All right, I just turned 69 a month ago.
Oh, okay. So for sure, yeah, that's boomer, right?
Yeah,
Boomer generation. Yeah. So
tail end of it, pretty much. I didn't get to do all the drugs and free sex that
uh
the older boomers did. Protest the war and all that stuff. I was still in high school.
yeah, not the fun part of the boomers.
Nah,
Um
not really.
I'm 40. I'm an older millennial. I was 16 in the year 2000. And my the peak of the curve of my audience, I think, is about 22, 24, somewhere around there.
Okay.
So it's a whole multi-generational um vibe that we're all working on. And I wondered if you had any insights about that, about how things were different for your generation, mine, and then the Zoomers.
Yeah. Um, I do have a thought about it, because when I started addressing nice guy syndrome as a therapist,
Hmm.
probably a little over 30 years ago, because I started seeing it in myself. I was in a relationship. I was married to my second wife, and she basically said, "I'm going to leave you if you don't go get help." She says, "Everybody thinks you're a nice guy, but you're not." And she was right. I was indirect. I was passive aggressive. I couldn't set a boundary. I didn't even know what boundaries were.
Yeah.
I already had a doctorate in marriage and family therapy. I had no idea what a boundary was.
Hmm.
And um, and I was passive aggressive, and I was dishonest, and I didn't want her ever to be upset at me. And I used what I call covert contracts, trying to keep her in a good mood so she'd have sex with
Yes.
me.
Yes.
Oh, just a lot of nice guy simp, behavior. And as I started looking at this stuff in me, I was a marriage and family therapist. Men were coming to me for therapy, maybe with their wives or girlfriends, and saying, I'm a nice guy. I'm one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. I treat her better than her ex. I'm raising her kids. They go to a private school. I buy her the car she wants. I send her on the trip she wants. It's never enough. When's it going to be my turn? She's never happy. She never wants to have
Yeah.
sex anymore. So
Right.
that sounds a lot like the guy with the big box on his back. I do everything and don't seem to get much out of it. And I thought, well, man, I can finish these guys' sentences for them. I mean, they're just like me.
Yeah.
And so I started a men's group, a No More Mr. Nice Guy men's group. And that's when I started writing kind of the lessons, just kind of like you started drawing pictures. I started writing stuff,
Hmm.
giving this to the men in my group. Soon started another group. And over time, these men and their wives and girlfriends said, you should write a book. You should go on Oprah. This could be a bestseller. So I just kept writing. Took about 6, 7 years. But most of the men I was working with at that time were probably my age-ish, maybe a little bit younger, right?
Hmm.
And a big thing that I heard from a lot of the men is that a lot of them had a big disconnect from their fathers.
Hmm.
Either their dads worked a lot, uh, divorced home, dads weren't around, maybe saw them on weekends, or maybe dad was abusive slash addictive. And the boy had to protect his mother and siblings from angry dad.
Yeah.
There was just a big disconnect from father. Now, kind of go fast forward. My son is 39, so same as you, he's a millennial.
Hmm.
And what I hear now from a lot of the millennials and the Generation Z is not so much that big disconnect from father, even though still, divorces, dad out of the picture.
Yeah.
But what a lot of guys are telling me, and my son could have said this as well and could say it, is that now they're saying instead of, oh, my dad was an asshole, never around, beat mom, whatever they say, oh, my dad was a nice guy. And all he ever taught us was don't piss off your mother because
Yeah.
that's what he was trying so hard to do. So I think there's a lot of factors that play into why there's so many more nice guys now, why it's kind of simp nation out there
Yeah.
with the younger generation.
Hmm.
Part of that is fathers teaching their sons, don't piss off women. Part
Yeah.
of it is culture. Don't piss off women. I mean, if you work for any major corporation, any corporation in the US, there are laws that require the corporation to protect women from feeling, you know, uncomfortable. Anything a man might do
Yeah. And
is,
they game it too.
so we've got situations where we're trained, don't piss off women. And it happens in school. I mean, for boys to get from second to third grade with female teachers, not only
Hmm.
do we have to learn our reading, writing, and arithmetic, but how to please a woman.
Yeah.
And so again, all of that's probably pretty normal stuff if we don't, but if we have masculine initiation, we get to move through it.
Yeah.
Then add in, of course, social media, the whole toxic masculinity, girls good, boys bad, how that's, promoted in social media, in the
Hmm.
school systems. So we now do have we're just breeding little nice guys, by the millions of them worldwide, not just in Western culture or
Yeah.
English speaking cultures. I get emails from men all over the world.
Yeah.
Some of them don't even translate. They just send them in their native language. And I go,
And they just
I, I,
hope.
I think this guy's just saying, thank you for writing your book.
Yeah, most likely. Yeah, this is I made a video a little while ago for TikTok about what it is that makes a man creepy, and most men, TikTok is very bitter, so most of the men were just saying ugly equals creepy, but I kind of talked about women get that creep response, and we all have the instinct to protect them when they get it, and they've learned to game that against men, and they'll just say, oh, that guy is making me feel creeped out, and then he loses his job and gets sent away and all that. And we don't have any defenses against that right now. And the last few years were pretty bad with the whole sitting there with the believe all women thing was pretty crazy. I think
And
it's like even the ones who are lying.
yeah, that was just the meme.